Hello, renegade thinkers. When I moved back, take two. Hello, renegade thinkers. When I moved to New York in 1982, I know it's a long time ago, my first job was at JWT, then known as the University of Advertising. I learned a lot there, but one of the biggest lessons came from their bathrooms. Yep, if you walked into a bathroom at JWT New York, any time over the last 4 decades, you would find without fail one brand. That brand was Listerine. Its presence was not a statement about the bad breath of all the agency workers or their dietary choices. On the contrary, it was there as a reminder that Listerine was a client of the agency, an important client, one that was worth supporting even when there was no such thing as good tasting Listerine. For those of us who worked on Listerine, it was also a steady source of inspiration. We weren't just the agency, we were customers and heavy users at that. The lesson of drinking your own product never left me. Fast forward a few years, and I'm delighted to share how this approach, albeit differently in the services world, can be so powerful for B2B brands, especially those who have a product or service that involves marketing or marketing to marketers. And with that, I'm thrilled to welcome Shirley Macbeth, CMO of Forrester, the global consultancy that I suspect is familiar to just about every listener. So welcome, Shirley.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So first of all, how are you?
I am well. I was wondering where you're headed with the Listerine, but we call it drinking our own champagne. So we've upgraded, but the analogy still works. I love it.
Yeah, there you go. I know. Yeah, you really don't want to drink Listerine.
Right.
It's got that alcohol in it, but it's also got something to keep you from doing that. Well, I saw a funny sketch on SNL the other day where people were at a cocktail party post-pandemic, and nobody had a question other than, "So, how was the pandemic for you?" And anyway, it made me laugh because it is an awkward time. Anyway, and I think that's relevant to our conversation today because, I mean, didn't you start at Forrester pretty much right as the pandemic sort of shut offices down?
I started on March 14th, which is a date that many will remember, is that Monday that everybody's cars stayed at home and they didn't go to work. And that was my first day joining Forrester as Chief Marketing Officer. So all entirely virtual experience up to this point and still going.
Amazing. And so how did being 100% virtual or remote, if you will, impact just, your approach? Particularly, I would think the first 90 days would be so tricky.
Well, you rely a lot on face-to-face connections, or at least that's how I've relied on in the past, of getting to know people and very quickly having to learn to adapt and fine-tune your skills for being online on video, which we're all now used to, but having to really focus on communications and reaching out to make those connections was probably the first lesson I learned.
Yeah, it's just harder. You just have to be more overt about it, more deliberate about it. It ends up, of course, in the last year, I've talked to a number of CMOs who started after the March 14th date. And what's so strange is they've never physically met any of their employees.
That is the case. Yeah, that's the case for me too. And it's actually there's a lot of good that's come out of virtual when you think of the fact that it puts everybody on a level playing field. So all of your employees, wherever they sit, all have the same size square on a box and in these Zoom meetings. And that's going to be interesting as we go back to the office where there's big groups of people in maybe a central office. And we've got to make sure that those voices are equal at the table going forward.
It's such an interesting notion that somehow or other this democratized the business world. And I also think it's funny, it's a function of Zoom in that only one person can speak at a time.
That's true. That's true. Right. And you've got to get your voice heard. You're not talking over people. And again, I think it shows people's faces. It's a different way of speaking, which I like the word democratization. I think that's fair. It levels the playing field and everybody has an equal voice on a call, on a Zoom, et cetera.
So let's go back and just say, what was your mandate?
Well, my mandate was to a couple of things. Was rolling out a new brand for Forrester at the time, but very quickly it was also how do first and foremost, how do we help our clients during this pandemic? Forrester is a research company, and what we did very quickly was pivot in a number of ways to help clients that were suddenly needing data. They were needing different types of information. They were needing more touch points with our analysts. And from a marketing point of view, how did we, in showing our brand, we wanted to be right there on our our brand promises, being on their side and by the side of our clients, helping them through. And it became a real test of doing that. We quickly pivoted to short form research, quick iteration, quick publishing. And we found that we were able to, in those times of need, really show that extra value. So it ended up being a test, but also we had some lasting effects from that that we learned towards some future product iterations that maybe we needed to change and evolve how we delivered to our clients because of some of the lessons that we learned. Faster, more interactive, all those sorts of things that have led us now a year later to announce a new portfolio that addresses what we learned and what we found people needed during the pandemic.
Okay, there's so much to unpack there. We
Yeah.
have to go, there's a lot. So we're going to start, we're going
I
to
make it seem easy. Yes. Yeah.
Let's break this down because the folks are dizzy at the moment because we've got so much that you just talked about in that last thing. And first I want to start as we get, you take on this job that with Forrester, and you're dealing with a company that has huge awareness. I mean, in terms of the marketing world, I mean, there isn't a B2b CMO that I know that doesn't know Forrester. I mean, and they know them from any number of angles, whether as a research company that's provided them research or as analysts who have weighed in on whether their company is in a competitive situation or not. So they are aware of this brand. So when you come to an assignment like this as a CMO, first of all, what attracted you to it? Because this is such an interesting challenge.
Well, yeah, it was one of these things, the opportunity to work for a company that part of their product is targeted towards people like me. That was tremendously appealing because as a marketer and CMO and all of the folks listening here, very few people talk your language, really. It can get lonely at the top at an organization where you are the expert. You are the only expert oftentimes at the top level of your organization. But to have that community of thinkers that were former practitioners and marketers that are researching the latest trends, to have that data that was compelling to me. And I often, people say, well, are people criticizing, or are they looking too closely at what you're doing? And actually it's comforting to me to know at a phone call away to pick up and say, run something by, or a strategy by our own people. It's amazing. So to have that tools and to learn from the best was a very unique opportunity.
So we've got this situation where Forrester is in the position and has been, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back a little even further. You said your mandate was to launch a new brand. So is that the result of the Sirius merger or the acquisition? And that was the brand, or there was a sort of a decision being made that we needed to evolve the Forrester brand?
Yeah, good question. So I'd say there's two mandates I had. One was to, ramp up and our lead generation and our, plan in the marketplace, of course. And the second was to launch this new brand. And you can see it behind me. It's Bold at Work is the Forrester brand that we were launching. And it did reflect a new Forrester. And the idea was there's the Forrester that people know for research and a number of areas. And then there was the acquisition, like you said, of SiriusDecisions that is a leader in B2b marketing, product, sales, research. And what does the combination of those two entities coming together for a larger value proposition, what did that mean? And we, worked on that. And our result was we are helping clients be bold at work. We've got not only the future looking research that Forrester is well known for, but the tools and the frameworks and the demand waterfall and things that Sirius was really well known for. All in one. And so that was my challenge, is how do I bring that to market and help people understand what the value of 1 + 1 = 3?
And Bold at Work was in place when you arrived. Am I correct?
Although that hard work had been done, that literally right as I walked in, the brand, what it was going to be, Bold at Work had been worked on with a number of our actually internal analysts and others. So that hard work was done, but I'd say activating, bringing that to life, and the next steps were what I was tasked with doing.
So this is really interesting because there's a moment you have your positioning, your what we would call your purpose-driven story statement, Bold at Work. Great, it's both a promise and almost a demand, a challenge, right? You've got to be bold at work. And then suddenly the pandemic comes, and everything at that moment, people aren't thinking of necessarily about bold, they're thinking about survival. And they're wondering, there's so much uncertainty, March, April, May, that was there any point in time in those first couple months where you said, do we have this wrong?
Well, it's interesting. We talked a lot about what is bold at work, and sometimes bold can mean a moonshot. It can mean one of those big things for a big technology transformation, but more often than not, it's those daily moments of feeling confident in putting forth a budget proposal, or it's making a confident investment in something. So large or small, we call these bold decisions. Bold decisions can happen at any level. And we found more often than not through this pandemic, people needed more confidence to make even smaller decisions because those dollars need to stretch more. We found through the pandemic that the number in a B2b selling cycle, that the number of interactions and the hoops that you have to go through as a seller and a marketer have risen from 17 to 27 interactions, which, if we didn't think our job was hard enough, just to think of how many touches, and that's because those contracts and those dollars are hard, you've got to effectively spend. So having sort of the data and the confidence to be bold in your decision of where am I going to place that investment, we actually found that it rang really true.
Yeah, that statistic is so startling and scary. I can see, just feel the cringes going on among the listeners as they think, getting to 27 touches and what that means, and and just thinking about tracking that, the zigzaggy process. So we'll get back to that. It's funny. I was thinking of, I saw a post on LinkedIn. I'm going to shout out to Sydney Sloan of SalesLoft, who had talked about in her LinkedIn post, it was like this bold moment for her where she and her CFO had partnered to go in to recommend like doubling the budget or something like that. And it was such a proud moment. And part of the boldness, I would think, it's not wild ass guesses. And I suspect that part of your promise is you can be bold at work because you have the insights you need. Am I reading into that?
That's exactly right. You need the confidence. I associate bold with confidence because you come armed to that C-level table to put forth a proposal, and you feel good about that because you have data. Often marketing, there's so much we rely on gut, and we still want to do that, but to have a confidence of a framework or benchmarks from other companies and show what you're doing relative. I'll give you an example of my own boldness. Within a month or so of joining Forrester, I looked at our marketing spend, and one of the things our data shows, we have a number of benchmarks that show, different size companies, different industries, and what the typical spend is, and not only that, how they spend it. And I put ourselves through one of our benchmarks and came out at the other side with something I kind of guessed going in, which was we were underspent for marketing considerably. And I went to my CEO and said, here's what the industry is spending. Here's, in high growth, here, all these different parameters. And he said, you know what? I have never, first of all, we're drinking our own champagne, but he says, I kind of intuitively also felt we were underspent, but I had no way of knowing that. So guess what? I got the extra spend, and it was that I felt I was emboldened because of having the data to prove that, which was phenomenal. So a nice win early on in my tenure at Forrester to really show the value of marketing.
Interesting. And what a fascinating moment, because I'm just using our own tools here, Chief.
Right,
Right?
right.
I'm not making this stuff up unless you're making it up for our clients. This is the real deal. We're underspending. Amazing. I can imagine that, boy, if there's a link to that tool or study or anything, the listeners will be anxious to do it, because most marketers underspend. It's the rare company that is overspending, and part of that, I always sort of say, is that there's so few CEOs and board people who come from marketing.
Right. It's one of those that's hard, especially I would say in the pandemic time, especially hard to demonstrate the value in ways that the C-suite will understand or the board will understand. When push comes to shove, I'm going to look at hiring an extra sales rep before I'm going to necessarily invest in marketing. And then to be able to prove the value and show why that matters, not only just as investment, but along the way through other tools and frameworks, is critical. And that's, I think, the CMO, the future of a CMO is becoming all the more digital, all the more data driven to really appeal and be able to prove the value of what marketing does.
Okay, we're gonna dive into that in a second. We're gonna take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about how you've activated Bold at Work. Besides getting a bigger budget, now you have to spend this. So we'll be right back. If you don't mind, I'd like to plug CMO Huddles for a moment. Launched in 2020, CMO Huddles is an invitation-only subscription service that brings together an elite group of CMOs to share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO described Huddles as timely conversations with smart peers in a trusted environment, while another called it a cross between an expert workshop and a therapy session. If you're an ever-curious CMO who can share and dare with the best of them, visit cmohuddles.com or just hit me up on LinkedIn so we can offer you a guest pass. Okay, we're back. And we've been talking about, you've got this great sort of new brand promise challenge. We'll call it a story statement of Bold at Work. One of the ways you've activated it was just getting more budget so you could be bolder. But let's talk about some of the other ways that you activated this, and perhaps you could talk about it from an employee standpoint first.
Absolutely. Well, the opportunity with the new brand, not only is to take that to the marketplace and talk about who you are, but importantly, your people have to be brought along on that ride to understand who is the new Forrester in our case. What does that mean? And part of it was the integration of SiriusDecisions together with Forrester. But another important pivot that we were making at the same time was to really pivot from being a product-driven company to a portfolio-driven, persona, targeting personas and targeting customers by needs. So all of this kind of happening at the same time led us to, I'll just give you a great example. Part of the brand activation for Bold at Work culminated in an event, a 3-day event that we did in September, which we called Bold at Work Week. And we had 3 days of virtual sessions with only focused on our own employees to really help them understand, well, what does Bold at Work mean? Who are we serving? And to help understand our buyers better, rather than thinking about what do our products do, we pivoted to who are our buyers? What do we do for them? And how do we help them? What are their needs? We focus a lot on what are their needs and their priorities. And so throughout this 3-day journey, and again, part of our own research, really shows that sweet spot of activating a brand. It's that BX, brand experience, customer experience, and employee experience. When the 3 of those are working really well, your employees are delivering that brand experience every day. So that was a really important part of our brand activation.
And what kind of tools do you give employees so that, and typically where these things fall apart is compensation doesn't change, valuations don't change. And as a result, it's still business as usual. Everybody knows what the statement is, but people aren't living it because they're not forced to. Were there any changes when you made this change to Bold at Work where employees were suddenly encouraged to be bold at Forrester, and how they could be bold at Forrester and rewarded for it?
Absolutely. I'll give you 2 examples. One is we looked at our values, and we decided our values were on point with who we are, but we spent extra effort focusing on the behaviors to deliver those values. So, curiosity, integrity, those are some examples. And then we not redefine, but we really helped explicitly talk about the behaviors that support those values to help be and help our clients be bold at work. So that was number one. But the second really important piece about activating this new brand was, again, that pivot that I was talking about from product to audience-led, persona-led, leading with the customer. And we realized, in fact, our whole go-to-market needed to be adjusted. We basically looked at ourselves honestly in the mirror and said, wow, all of our materials and everything is written about us. It's not written about our clients. Forrester has long been known for its customer obsession focus and the research that we do, but we really hadn't applied that to ourselves. And so I always say the cobbler's children have no shoes. We really hadn't taken that and internalized that. So part of the rewards and everything that you talked about really had to do with, first of all, aligning product, sales, and marketing as functions and saying, agreeing on what are our targets, who are we serving, who are we trying to be, and at the same time saying, what are we not trying to be? It's actually harder, I think, to say what are we going to say no to, or where are we not going to emphasize, and kind of joining the virtual arms to say, yes, our product direction is going this way, our sales compensation and our goals will be focused around. And what we came out of again, using our methodologies was 5 key personas. We had a bunch of stickies on the wall, if you can imagine, opportunities and areas where we could play or do have customers, but we said, where, if you're going to do, and every marketer's had to do this during the pandemic, you really got to focus, and where are you going to focus and place your bets? And that was part of this brand evolution to say we're really focused for us on 5 key personas: tech buyers, CMOs, chief product officers, chief sales officers, and customer experience officers. And it's been liberating actually to really get to that level of clarity across the organization.
Interesting. God, I have so many questions. One question I have on that, first of all, I have a comment, which is the realization that you're not the hero of your own story is a hard reckoning. I think it's particularly hard in the consulting industry, the research industry, because you are experts, but you're really the wise sage, and you're not the hero. You're the one who helps Luke. You're Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you just have to get to know, live with that. Which is a wonderful place to be. The question that I have is, how many personas, if you will, targets did you have before you got to the 5, and how did you whittle it down to those?
So I'd say maybe 20. And wow. It's not only because buyers use our services for a number of things, but who are we really targeting? And then it's actually led us to evolve our product portfolio to develop services specifically for those 5 personas. But not only was it was around industries and around geographies and things like that, and really helped us get clarity around where are we going to place those important marketing investment dollars that are going to align with, in this country, literally, we have a map of in this country, which personas and which, languages and all sorts of things do we target. And again, it's hard to get there because you want to be all things to all people, and there's opportunities, but when you really drive that focus, I think a year into this, we're really starting to see that pay off, where our salespeople know what they're doing. They've been trained on understanding the needs of those personas. They're people, after all, CMOs, and going out there and talking the language and being able to have much better interactions.
Well, so I'm thinking of Peter Drucker. I think he's the one who said the definition of strategy is saying no, or knowing what to say no to. I'm curious, did that mean walking away from some business?
It did mean walking away from intentionally going after certain types of clients, for sure. And maybe those customers would continue with Forrester, but we're not intentionally going after them as we would have. So it's hard to say no. We evolved our product set. So we intentionally walked away from certain products that we felt weren't meeting the needs in the way they used to, maybe 5-10 years ago. And so we've also made some tough choices to shed parts of our product portfolio to enable investment in other areas. And it's been liberating. It's been scary, right, to say no to something that is driving revenue. But when you see the greater opportunity of moving a dollar here, but investing in something else that has more growth, that's exciting for everyone.
I think in our prep show, you said you used to have a couple hundred products. Is that right?
If you can believe it, yes. And I'm sure the proliferation of products, when you think of SKUs and everything, every company probably has a scary looking price book and that you would never believe. But when your sellers go, and we were guilty of the same thing, Forrester, if you can imagine, had well over 100 products, if you will, and different permutations and different, ways that we combined. And what we found is actually during this pandemic, we did a lot of customer interviews, in fact, hundreds of our own clients, to understand what they're doing, but also how could we help them better. And loud and clear, we heard it's actually kind of hard. It's confusing to know, what you offer and how. And we said, well, that's a problem. We've really got to simplify this experience, because if it's hard for our clients, it's hard for our salespeople, and we're not ultimately delivering the value that we know we could if we were easier to work with.
And this is a point, it's funny, it's conversations that we've had with clients, particularly in merged organizations. Simplicity, getting to simple is hard because it means saying no to some things. It means, either, as you did, you walked away from some targets. But so how many, from 100 to how many products did you reduce it down to?
So our go forward, we have our legacy. I don't have an exact answer for that, but I could say our new product portfolio that we are rolling out has 5 targets, 5 personas. And we have some secondary, like a chief marketing officer. We have some products under that for the for the marketing operations leader, the ABM leader, things like that. So there's 5 top line personas. And then actually our new portfolio has 15 choices, but it's targeted at 5 key buyer audiences. So it's a lot more simple. So if you go to a CMO, you've got something that looks interesting. Hey, I've got something for you as your leader, and I've got something for you, your teams, to make them successful.
Got it. Okay. So it's down a lot because
a lot.
And somewhere between 15 and 30, if we had 3 products per 5 targets, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the hardest part of this process from a marketing perspective?
I think the hardest part probably goes to integration. And so we were in the middle of an integration of these 2 brands, number one, strong brands, and then the technology to bring them together and look at leads and things in a new way. And we realized that the Forrester systems, as an example, in marketing, needed to be much more technically sophisticated to track and implement what we knew was best in class. So I would say the toughest challenge was being honest and saying, hey, we need to really simplify our technology infrastructure to help and our technology marketing stack. So we are a year into that. We just implemented our own demand waterfall, which now helps and has a very shared view, as we say, for sales and marketing, to look at pipeline, to look at where influence is happening, and leads are being generated, and marketing has influence. And I can tell you, it's just revelatory again to have that data to say this is working well, and this maybe we need to adjust accordingly. Another example I would give is a pivot that we've made, and I think a lot of marketers are making this pivot during the pandemic. You really need to focus on current clients a lot more. The marketing function used to be typically simply demand, new logos, new demand, et cetera. And I put in place right when I started a customer experience and a customer marketing function as new functions for Forrester, because of the value of enriching and creating advocates with current clients, especially during this time.
I just amen to that. It's just so important. And I think a lot of companies, particularly in last year, March, April, May, it was a hug your customers moment, because who knew if you were going to close any new ones? But also what was so interesting is, in a lot of cases, software companies discovered that their products that were in place were being underused. So just having conversations and really reaching out and embracing the customer, saying, are you doing okay? How's your financial situation? What can we do to help? And you touched on this at the very beginning of the show when you talked about how we really took our content with an eye for what are the immediate challenges that our customers are facing at this second that are unique, and how can we help them get through it? That attitude was I think a really profound moment for almost everybody in the marketing world, which was this wake up and sort of say, you know what? It's not about us, it's about our customers, and we better be paying attention with enormous brand empathy. So, all right, that's a lot of preaching. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a sort of, we'll call it swimming in your own waterfall. So stay with us. Okay, we're back. And one of the things we haven't really gotten into at all is you have this acquisition of SiriusDecisions, and people at SiriusDecisions, I know, because I know a number of CMOs and other folks that like live and breathe the waterfall. I mean, it's just permeates their very being. And so I wonder, as you were looking at this brand, and inevitably, you know, there's going to be brand consolidation because you just don't need both brands necessarily. So talk a little bit about this consolidation, and then sort of how you got to the Forrester Decisions product, if you will.
Sure. Yes. Well, as any marketer knows, there's after an acquisition, there's always a lot of things at play when you consider, do you keep that? Do you have a master brand only? Do you bring in and have a coexistence brand strategy? And where do we go with this? So a year into the acquisition is when I joined. And at that point, for the full year before, we had maintained separate sales teams and separate customer marketing to really not disrupt anything with current clients, to keep that value going. But a year into it, especially as we were rolling out our new brand, it was time to start thinking planfully about evolving that brand strategy. So one of the things I did last fall was a global brand study to really test the Forrester brand. What does it stand for? Who does it appeal to? What are the attributes that, we think we were good at this? What do people say? And secondly, we also tested the SiriusDecisions brand. And one of the things that we found was the SiriusDecisions brand just has this, love amongst marketers, as just you've talked about. I knew it before I joined, but amongst sort of the world at large, as far as B2B decision makers, it wasn't as well known. The Forrester brand really eclipsed the size and the reach of that brand. So it made us feel confident in the fact that we could make a brand transition that would make sense. Part of our transition was also to talk to current customers. And one of the things, I think, being lucky in that we serve marketers expected this. They said, we know you're going to change this brand at some point. Just don't change the demand waterfall. Just don't change the value of what you provided to us. As long as we have that, we don't care what it's called. So we went on a planful master brand transition to what we just launched about a week ago, which is a new product, which is called Forrester Decisions. So a tip of the hat to SiriusDecisions, in that it brings together the best of Sirius and the best of Forrester in new ways that we wouldn't have even imagined before the pandemic. We combined sort of that data that you need of customer research and forward-looking research with the tools and methodologies, plus more. And that was made possible through bringing these brands together and creating something new and more valuable.
Well, and I think that's so interesting because there's a couple things, and this came up in our pre-call, that the loyalty to Sirius was not necessarily to the brand name. It was right to the waterfall and to the process of it. And I think that's really important as brands are looking at consolidating, to understand what the loyalty is to, right? And sometimes the brand is inseparable from the product. And I've seen this in cases like when Oracle bought Eloqua went away, and all the Eloquens were like, wait, where's my Eloqua? And so it wasn't they were loyal to marketing automation at that point. They were loyal to this world and the certification and all that. But being able to discover that as you're doing it, I think was a really important thing. The other thing that I think is really interesting, and a mistake, or let's put it this way, an opportunity that isn't often capitalized on, when you have this merger, in theory, there is a promise that 1 + 1 = 3. But often what happens is they just take the same product and just rename it. And, it's got to be a disappointment to the marketplace, because if you are bringing together two organizations, in theory, both had strengths. And if we can find a way to bring those strengths together, as you're describing SiriusDecisions, then everybody wins, right? Because now you get the people who are loyal to the waterfall get a better waterfall.
Exactly. It's understanding. And again, this pivot for us to being audience centric and customer centric help us to understand what those needs of the people we were serving are. And then we were able to really build a new portfolio to meet those needs. So it wasn't, hey, let's take the same and the other and let's put it together, which, a product centric organization we've done. Our decision was really informed through, in this time during the pandemic, something like 500 interviews, and we had a number of beta testers throughout that contribute to what do you need? What is that sweet spot of combination of the tools and the frameworks from the serious kind of day-to-day workings of your job to, hey, we have all sorts of consumer research about your buyers, as an example, or we have Forrester waves that analyze the technologies you should be putting in place. How do you combine that to make it something that is very useful? And we talk about helping you really shorten the distance between what you want to do, that vision, your vision, and your impact. And that's what it's all about during the pandemic, especially.
Interesting. As I'm thinking about all of this, and we have a new product that is, again, it's sort of the best of Forrester and the best of SiriusDecisions. Would that have been, is it fair to say that's another expression of Bold at Work?
Absolutely. I think we're proud that, again, drinking our own champagne, using our frameworks, that by taking, and I'd say that first step of pivoting towards an audience-centric point of view, we were introspective and learned we could be serving our clients better. And so we made the bold decision over this last year to go on the offense. And we invested actually during a time, we invested in product development, and we invested in some digital upgrades that we were honest with ourselves and said we could be doing more. And we did. And a year later, coming out of that, we were proud to, be coming to market with something new.
I love it. Really, when we talk a lot to smaller companies who are thinking about rebranding, and often that rebranding is cosmetic. And it really drives me crazy, honestly, because if you're going to the trouble of saying, hey, we're newish, we're a little bit different, but you don't bring a new product that proves it, what are you doing really? You're just, it's so troublesome, because if you're gonna make a new promise, you need a product or service to back it up. Personally, that's just me ranting for a second. So I'm curious, one other thing that you mentioned that I think is so important, I just want to put a bow on, is you didn't just say, hey, we need a new product, let's go develop it and put it out there. It sounded like you did some beta testing to sort of prove it, or proof of concept, to make sure that you weren't, in fact, messing with something that people already loved and didn't need fixing.
Exactly. Well, first, so our current portfolio, we have clients that may stay in that portfolio, but we really feel the value in the new is going to drive clients even further. But part of our process was was extremely iterative, and we talk about marketing and understanding our target audience's needs. And we literally, and I had this sheet that I showed you last time, we market by needs, and we understand. So the B2B marketer is really, at the end of the day, looking to formulate their marketing strategy and drive transformation. And so when you think about those and get alignment with your audience through interviews on what are they really looking for, you're able to then take that back to the product development and come up with something that really is honed to what people are looking for. And those needs are going to evolve. I think a lot of needs have accelerated during this time, and our product is built that it can evolve in that way as well.
So before we wrap up, I want to make sure that all marketers, you started a little more than a year ago. You had a mandate to drive demand and in some ways enhance brand and so forth. What metrics do you look to sort of justify your existence and say, we had a good year?
Well, we are looking at a number of things, but first and foremost, our use of our own demand waterfall to show impact on marketing sourced leads and opportunities that close that were sourced by marketing as well as influenced by marketing. So it's very clear through the waterfall and to understand what's working and what's not working. And the great thing about that is we can fine tune as we go and say, well, that program didn't really work. We're going to, maybe invest towards, trying something new. So those types of proof of our impact is really important.
So that's part one. And are you your own best case history yet?
Not yet. I would say it takes a little while. I'll be honest. We, again, the systems to be able to see exactly what we want. And we've, as a brand, Forrester in our research has now announced the latest iteration of its demand waterfall, which is amazing. As a marketer, I'm so excited because it takes into account existing clients as part of the demand stream. So we've actually renamed it to be the B2b Revenue Waterfall, because demand, as we talked about, is not just new leads and new logos. In fact, a huge portion of that for most organizations is building out and retaining your clients and having upsell and enrichment and things like that. So we need to now implement and start looking at that more holistic picture. And so it's a work in progress. We're drinking our own champagne. We're getting better and better, and more to come.
So we talked about one big area being leads and sort of, we'll call it revenue growth. Mm-hmm. Are there any other sort of dashboard metrics that you look at to sort of judge and say, here's how I should be judged from a performance standpoint?
Yes, there's one other, which is, again, with drinking our own champagne, with the starting of a formal customer experience function, we actually used our own CX index, as we call it, which is a index, or it's a survey that is geared towards B2B audiences. We have a consumer one as well, but this one for B2B. And so we're at our second fielding. So after this month, we will have fielded all of our customers to understand, where do we sit and what do they think of us and where do we need to improve? And I can tell you it's telling. We have more opportunities to get even tighter with customers, demonstrate the value, help them demonstrate the value of what they do. And so there's a CX index number, and our opportunity is to grow that and improve that by making deliberate actions that reflect where our customers, told us we need to improve.
Interesting. And it'd be so in theory, I don't know the index, but I do, I can imagine sort of the components of it. And let's just say there's several things where in theory you could press those pedals a little bit more and improve on them, and then you would see the index rise. Is that sort of the notion?
Exactly.
And so is it too short a time to know that the actions that you've taken have in fact improved your index since you've been there?
It's a little early, but I could say some of the things around building trust within an organization of driving, helping our clients be successful. There was things around how do I help justify my investment and things like that. And we've built that more into the product consciously. So that's part of Forrester Decisions. So I'd say the next time we talk, Drew, probably I'd have a little bit more metrics, but all of that thinking went into the development of the new portfolio.
So as we wrap up, we've got a bunch of marketers who are listening, and they're sort of wondering, okay, what are the biggest lessons that you've learned as a result of this experience, sort of, again, drinking your own champagne, that would be good takeaways from this episode for them?
I'd say number one, as a marketer, to really get that alignment of product, sales, and marketing. That trifecta coming together is essential. And getting everybody in a room, having data to inform those stickies that you put up on the wall, and walking out with a clear set, a small set, and that's hard. So I'd say the alignment of targets amongst product, sales, and marketing would be number one. Number two is, don't underestimate the importance of employees as part of your brand value proposition. They are the ones that deliver it, and are your ambassadors and the voices in the marketplace. So spend time and energy on engaging your employees as part of the brand, and the power of that through social media and a number of other ways is super exciting. So those are the top two things I would have as takeaways.
I love it. Those are awesome takeaways. I think, and so we've got alignment. Don't forget about employees, and then of course customers as a way of doing it. Well, Shirley, thank you so much. I know I have a million more questions, but my listeners have finished their workout. They're drying off. They're saying, "Drew, bring this to a close." So that's exactly what we're going to do. Again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I loved it. It's great to talk to you.
And to all the listeners, be sure to check out the show notes and all sorts of other good things on renegade.com. Renegade Thinkers Unite is written and directed by Drew Neiser. Hey, that's me. Audio production is by Sam Beck. Show notes are written by Melissa Caffrey. The music is by the amazing Burns Twins, and intro voiceover is Linda Cornelius. To find the transcripts of all episodes, suggest future guests, or learn more about quite possibly the best marketing agency in New York City, visit renegade.com. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, and until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.